Live from Denver's Cherry Creek neighborhood, you are watching the Kyle Malnati Show. I'm your host, Kyle Malnati, and we are broadcasting from the office of Laura Ryle at Stewart Title. I'm with Josh Steck from FourStar, and Josh is a real estate broker with a management company and real estate brokerage called FourStar. They manage 2,000, and I said 2,000 units in the Denver metro area. Josh, thank you for being on the show today.
Thanks for having me.
So Josh, everybody has a story. What's your real estate story? How did you get involved in multifamily real estate?
You know, there's real estate has been in my family for a long time, but I guess the best part of the story is that I was coaching baseball at Boulder High School when I was in college, and one of the dads approached me and said, "What would you like to do with your life?" And
It's a heavy
was
question.
a little bit taken back, and I said, "You know, I intend to go into real estate." And he said, "Great, you start tomorrow." And I said, "Great, what do I do?" And he said, "Well, I own a real estate company in Boulder, and we have a brokerage and a property management division." And so that's when I got started in the property management side of it, about my sophomore year of college.
So Josh, I believe in having a purpose-driven lifestyle, which is always surrounded by the question, why? Why are we doing this? Why does this matter? So for you, why do you believe that multifamily matters or rental property matters to a community?
You know, I struggled with this. I actually don't, which is interesting being in the business. A community is made up of people. And so the real estate plays a very small role in it, but the people that live in the real estate play a significant role. And so we talk a lot about the gentrification of buildings when we take over the management of them. And that coincides with what we're doing at the building. And so we'll go in and we'll create a community with the tenants in the building, which ultimately is going to make the city of Denver a better place, but tends to make the tenants within the building a little bit happier, and being a part of a good community, and people that are moving in from out of state are joining a community. And so I think that it's the people that are living in the building or living in the real estate that make up the community.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that it's really this kind of funny thing. We talk about how buildings in our industry have personality, but the reality is they're inanimate objects. They're not living, breathing things. It's the people within them that really personify the building, and also the owners that own these properties and their direction, I'm sure, that they give to you as how they want to manage the building and how they want the building to operate really creates that personality within the community. So I think it's a great perspective in that it's not about the building, it's about the culture of the people living within it and how they interact with each other.
That's exactly right.
So I have had a lot of mentors in my career, and I believe that mentors are critical success. Talk to me about some of the mentors that you've had that have helped you along the way. As we're both about the same age, it's key to having a mentor in real estate.
Yeah, we've spoken about one of them. Phil at FourStar, who's one of the founding partners of FourStar, and Caldwell and some of the like within FourStar have certainly been integral in teaching me this business and getting me involved in it. But I think in addition to that, surrounding myself with people like you who have high expectations for themselves, that makes me have a higher expectation for myself, and I think that goes a long way. I think having high expectations of yourself is probably one of the pieces that will make you successful in this business and in others.
Well, that's a perfect segue to the quote that you selected for our show, and we try to always bring some sort of theme to our show by picking a quote by a famous author or leader, and Josh picked a quote by Henry Ward Beecher, and the quote is, "Hold yourself responsible for a higher standard than anyone, or anybody, expects of you. Never excuse yourself." I think that perfectly summarizes your thought process, and I agree. When you have a mentor, you've got that beacon, that person who's been there 5, 10, or in some cases, I had a mentor that had been there 30 years prior to me. And that person gives you that ability to see the future through their eyes, helps fast track you through some of that learning curve, and that's the benefit of working with a management company too. Investors have this wonderful ability to tap into all the experiences that you've had over 2,000 units, and it may be just their first building that they've bought or owned. Last month, our guest was Bobby Hutchinson, the investment director for Red Peak Properties, a large real estate institution here in Denver. And Bobby's question for you, Josh, was: do you see a change in the demand for parking spaces at apartment communities and just generally in the streets of Denver? Do you see a change in demand for parking?
Yes, certainly. I think that we need to talk about specific markets. Obviously, the downtown market looks a lot different than the Capitol Hill market or the Highlands market. And we can also bring in the type of product that we're talking about. A lot of this new product that's being built, that's renting out at $1,800 or $2,000 a bedroom.
Yeah.
Certainly the people that are renting out those units are going to expect a parking space to come with their place. On the other side of that, in the Capitol Hill market, when you're talking about, $1,100, $1,200, $1,300 a bedroom, those folks are probably a little bit more willing to rent a spot without a parking space to save a little bit of money. They're willing to park 5 blocks away and walk in. So I do think that has changed, certainly over the course of the last 5 to 10 years. People are a lot less focused on the parking aspect of it. The tenant comes into play there as well. We certainly find that men are typically a lot more willing to rent a space without a unit without a parking space attached to it, whereas a female, from a safety aspect, is more interested in renting a unit that has a parking space with it.
Yeah, and that would make a lot of sense. And I grew up on the East Coast before I moved out here to Denver, so I'm a transplant. I'm not a native like you are. But what comes with that is that you recognize that Denver, in relative terms, is a fairly new city. Some of the cities that I grew up in, they started being settled in the 16 and 1700s, and you'd have multifamily buildings that were built at that time. Denver really has only been growing for the last 70 years. Right after World War II is when a lot of the product that we sell, as well as the product that gets managed in apartments, those buildings weren't real efficient when it came to parking. And part of that's because Denver had tons of land. There's a lot of people that will joke that it's an old cow town. And when you've got tons of land and tons of street parking, it's not that big of a deal. But now that Denver is really growing quickly, what we see a lot of is we see the need for efficient parking. And I think a lot of this new development has got that in mind. I think Denver's done a really good job of making requirements for new development to have an adequate parking ratio. Because some of the stuff that you and I work on, built in the 1920s, may have one space if you're lucky.
Yeah.
So I think that it's a couple of different things that are going, and that's really interesting feedback from you.
Yeah, the city's certainly making people sharpen their pencils, making the developers sharpen their pencils a little bit more in order to include parking in their new developments. And I think that if you talk to a lot of developers around town, they're saying that's probably one of the largest challenges that they're experiencing.
So you're off the hot seat now. Now you get to ask a question to our next guest. We're actually booked for the next 4 shows into the new year, into February. So for our next guest, what question would you ask of them?
Landlords historically have not always had the greatest reputation. Mm-hmm. And yes. So in an effort to try to change that, I would like to ask the next guest what type of legacy they intend to leave behind. What are they doing in Denver today that is going to change the landscape of Denver tomorrow?
I love that question. I love the topic of legacy, and the guest that we have next is a family-owned business, and so I think that legacy question will hit right into what they should be talking to you about. My next question is: I believe that leaders are readers. And I believe that it's really important to educate yourself outside of formal schooling by reading good nonfiction books. What type of business book is your favorite, and why would you suggest that book?
So I can't, I'm not going to comment on the nonfiction piece of that, but I have.
But there's a story behind
There's a story behind this. I have 2 little kids, much like you, although you have 3. So
Yes,
you're a little crazier than I am. But I'm reading a lot of children's books today, and I think in each of the children's books there's a message that can be taken from it. And the one that comes to mind is probably one of the more popular books in children's literature today. It's called The Little Blue Truck, and it talks about the little blue truck that helps out everybody, not just the little guys or the big guys, but it helps out everybody. And I think the current style of business in Denver today maybe lacks some of that. Where
that cooperation or that willingness to help, whether you're large or small.
Yeah, and working together versus being opposing forces.
Yeah, that collaboration.
To accomplish making business in Denver today better. So that part of it, that part of the book was intriguing to me, and that working together we can all accomplish a lot. And then I certainly love to read blogs or articles about what other folks are doing.
Kind of that mentor topic of just kind of looking and seeing at what other people are doing and how you might be able to take best practices.
Yep.
The topic of children's books, you've got a 2-year-old and a 3-month-old, and so you're right in the thick of it. Our kiddos are growing up a little bit. We have a 6-year-old and twins that are 4, but we went from 0 to 3 kids in just 16 months, and like you said, we are a little crazy. But what happens, I think, for business owners when you have kids, you start reflecting on what you've learned and how you might be able to relate that to your children. And as you're reading these books, I was struck with the thought a couple of years ago that a lot of times I feel like the author is speaking to the parent more than to the child, and that the message is so much crafted for an adult, because all of these topics, being nice to each other, being polite, helping each other, cooperating, all of these things are things we need to see in business every day. So I think it's kind of an interesting contradiction in the question, and so I'm glad that you answered it that way. So our final question, and I love this one because a lot of the people who are watching our show have never bought a rental property before. What advice would you give to an aspiring real estate investor? You've got 2,000 units under management, you do a lot of real estate brokerage, so you've seen a lot of deals. What would you give as far as advice to a new investor?
So I mentioned that I was a baseball coach, so we'll use a baseball analogy here, but my best recommendation to somebody is to try to hit a single. A lot of people get into this business and expect to hit home run after home run after home run, and the reality is that's just not possible. New people getting into this business need 2 things, but they should try to hit a single, learn the business, figure out what's happening, and then secondly is to have a good management company to back you up. I have a lot more experience because we manage 2,000 units than somebody who's just getting into the business for the first time. So
you've had more at bats, and so you get to see what works and what doesn't work, and you've got the ability from a leasing standpoint to see what the market's doing on a day-by-day basis, as opposed to maybe once a month or once a year if you're buying your first duplex.
Correct. We're playing the whole season.
Yeah.
Whereas somebody who owns 1 building or 2 buildings may only be playing in the AllStar game.
Yeah, exactly.
And if they're only playing in the AllStar game, they may not. They may be trying to hit the home run, and there's pretty high risk there. So hit a single, and then have a good management company behind you to help
absolutely.
you out.
Yeah, and I think to your point about management, we've talked about that throughout the interview, is that good management companies, if you pick someone that really is successful within the neighborhoods that you're interested in investing in, you can fast track your success so much further, and it enables you to maybe take that single and turn it into a double, because you've got someone that's got a critical eye that would be able to see past the decision that you're trying to make. They've done this for several different clients, and I think that repetitive or that at-bat analogy of being able to step up to the plate and know what to expect is important. And then the other analogy, going with the baseball theme, is keeping your eye on the ball, using fundamentals and having a disciplined approach to how you're going to conduct your business. And I think that also ties into the mentality of looking to hit singles, is that you're just going to be disciplined and get up and do what you can to make fundamentals work on your behalf.
Yeah, and I would say in order to hit a single or have the opportunity to hit a double, you got to swing the bat.
Absolutely.
So you got to get in the game.
You got to get there.
So, be involved.
So Josh, I know that you've watched a lot of our podcasts, and you probably won't be surprised that I get a gift for all of my guests. And Josh had mentioned to me that I thought that he was probably not going to be using a fiction book as the recommendation. So this book is called Dada by Jimmy Fallon. I love Jimmy Fallon on The Tonight Show. And it's hilarious. It's for parents to read to their little children. And Jimmy, his first child's first word was mama. And so naturally a lot of kids say mama. So he wrote an entire book about an adult animal talking to its child animal, and the word dada is used in every single one. So I think
perfect.
I think that obviously I'm a dad myself, you are too, and I think that hopefully that'll be a fun gift.
That's great. Thank you.
I just want to say thank you, Josh, for being on our show.
Yeah.
This is the show where multifamily matters. I really appreciate Josh Steck from FourStar joining me today. We'll see you next month, and as I love to say, we will see you around the neighborhood.